Is this working now? Damn technology. I hope they got the link. It would really be nice to catch up.
Uh, Hi, Dad.
Nate. Hey, is your sister coming?
She should be along momentarily. Said she had to finish her history class.
Hey, sorry I'm late. Class ran over. We're covering the battle and siege of Yorktown.
Yorktown, you say? You know, you have some direct ancestors who were involved in that.
Really?
Really?
That's so cool. Do you have any more information about him? I'd love to tell my professor about it.
Yes. Anna and Nathaniel Wooster. I have some letters somewhere here, dated around that time. Ah, here it is. October 21st, 1781. Dearest Ma and Pa, hopefully this letter finds you well. As you know, when the British arrived in Yorktown, Anna and I took shelter in the cabin of Widow James while I recovered from my injuries. The bedroom I was using was simple, just the bed with a chair next to it and a window overlooking the green field behind her house.
Oh,
You stay still, child. You look to have stolen some ribs, and I've secured you to the bed to stop yourself from hurting yourself any further. Your Anna is downstairs making up some plasters as I've instructed her.
the British.
They're here, and most everyone from the town is gone. Your mother wanted to stay and tend to you, but your pa made her leave with him. Since I wasn't going anywhere, they left you with me. And of course, your young woman insisted on staying with you too. Made quite a scene, she did.
Where did our people go?
I didn't take note of it, as I was not accompanying them. They were following Mr. Richards up the road toward Williamsburg when they took their leave of me. But I know not whether they will find refuge there.
Ah! Oh!
I told you that I secured you to keep you from hurting yourself further, boy. I didn't mean I intended for you to try your restraint. Come in, child. Bring those plasters here.
I am sorry for causing so much trouble and concern. I should have been watching my footing better.
What you should have done was let your ma carry that load. Instead of pretending that you are equal to every task that any other man can do. Watch the whole thing I did. You are to be commended for trying to help your ma, but you've got to know your limits, boy.
Your strengths lie in other places than do most men's, Nathaniel. There is no need to try to prove yourself the equal of someone like Michael Bell.
Ugh, you once thought well enough of Michael Bell.
My father thought well of Patrick Bell, Michael's father. Michael and I were never more than childhood friends, whose fathers made an arrangement that we never agreed to. I never had any interest in anyone but you, Nathaniel.
I never knew.
Because I never told you until you came back from the war. You thought everything had changed and that you were less of a man than you had departed as. But I still saw the same man I knew, the same man I'd grown up admiring and wishing that I only had leave to share my thoughts with. I happened to meet you on the road, and I could see that you were still the same modest, devoted son to your parents as I had known before. But more than that, you are now covered in glory for your dedication to the cause of our freedom. And you couldn't even see it. You gave of your very body at Waxhaws to fight against the crown, and then made your way across all of North Carolina home, thinking nothing of the effort that voyage represented. A man who could do that ought to hold his head high in any company. Yet you seem to think that you should be ashamed of your sacrifice. And now, you've gone and hurt yourself more, trying to prove that you're the equal of someone like Michael Bell. Well, you are not his equal. You are far better than him and his Tory family, fighting on the other side against independence. To tell the truth, I was relieved that he joined the Loyalist militia, because I knew that my father would release me from that match with a Tory. But I was terrified that Michael would come face to face with you by some chance, and that one of you would die somehow in the transaction.
Oh, truly, I am glad to know all of this. It explains much that had haunted me, and makes me all the more certain that I want to spend my life with you. That day on the hill, I could make no sense of your interest in speaking to me, but I welcomed it all the same. When you made your interest in me known even more clearly, I confess that I wondered whether you were having sport at my expense, as I could not otherwise make sense of a girl with your qualities wanting to be courted by someone with such limited prospects to offer.
Limited prospects?
Let me finish. I am aware that my prospects are limited to some sort of work that does not involve most forms of labor, as there is little that can be done with one hand wholly incapable of movement. My first attempts to learn a trade that I could do with just one hand and with the tools of my mind were not particularly auspicious. Meeting you, though, gave me cause to redouble my efforts, and I have every faith that once this affair is concluded, I will be able to practice some form of useful arts, whether with ciphers or something else that I've not yet hit upon.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to influence you to find your way through the hard work required to learn a useful trade.
Are you two twittering birds done cooing at one another? We need to get that plaster on you, boy.
No.
Okay. All right. Let me show you how to apply it to his side.
How did Nathaniel lose his arm?
Oh, poor boy lost it to an infection after getting shot by the Redcoats at the Battle of Waxhaws.
Waxhaws? Wasn't that primarily loyalists and cavalry, though?
Yes, it was. Very good. But poor Nathaniel was shot by a British regular, although in all the chaos, he never saw who did it. Later, though, he began to suspect he was a victim of friendly fire. But lucky for him, the British were under orders to treat the wounds of everyone they found on the battlefield, Tory or Patriot. Otherwise, he very likely may have died. Although the surgeon's bedside manner apparently left a little bit to be desired. And I also really doubt at that moment he felt particularly covered in glory.
I'm just glad it wasn't that Michael Bell fellow who shot him. That really would have been tough for poor Anna.
Well, surviving any infection would have been tough in the 1780s. Not like Mrs. James was a time-traveling nurse from 1940s England or anything.
No, she was not. But fortunately for him, he does have Anna to tend his wounds. And even Claire Fisher, with all of her 20th century medical knowledge, would tell you that it's amazing what you can endure with a loving partner by your side. However, at this point in time, he was fairly recovered from the initial injury to his arm. Rather, he had slipped and lost his balance trying to lift his mother's kettle into a wagon as the British were coming, and the kettle landed on his chest, which is how he hurt his ribs.
That had to hurt a lot.
Ooh, I bet. And obviously more than just his ribs. It annoys me that Nathaniel felt like he had to be worried about finding something useful to do, and that somehow he was less of a man because he didn't have use of both of his arms, which probably led to him hurting himself trying to prove something he shouldn't have had to, even though Anna tried to tell him that he didn't have to prove himself to her.
Yes, it's unfortunate, but that's just how it was at the time.
I get that, and to an extent, it still is for people with physical limitations, but it shouldn't have to be. Was he at least able to learn a trade of some sort after the war?
Oh, yes, he became a very accomplished clerk. Learning how to do it was one of the defining moments of his and Anna's relationship. He had an excellent head for numbers, even corrected his father's calculations more than once.
Uh, what is the matter?
Oh, the British are searching and looting each house on this road, and we'll be here soon. I have convinced Mrs. James to let me do the talking, and that we will explain to the troops when they come that we are here for your convalescence, and will make no trouble for them. Of course, should they prove to be too persistent about insisting on taking what they want, Mrs. James will have her poker and her knives close at hand.
Won't be afraid to use them either. Mr. James and I lived out in the frontier for a piece, and I had to defend our house against thieving brigands on several occasions. I soon enough learned to give my house a wide berth when they were out raiding.
Oh, I don't doubt that in the least. What is it?
The soldiers turned away from the street and are heading back down the bluff. It looks as though they are joining their fellows in setting fire to the warehouses at the riverside?
But my father's warehouse is down there. I must go and see whether it can be saved.
Is there aught you can do about it if it cannot?
Well, not really, no.
Anna, go and fetch that shirt of Mr. James's for Nathaniel. Even if your father's warehouse does yet stand, they aren't going to let you inside. They've seized up all the useful goods that they could find in town already, and have brought back all manner of goods that they collected the surrounding area as well. There can be no doubt that everything within their reach is forfeit to their needs.
In truth, our own armies operate in much the same manner when the opportunity arises. We rarely received any supplies provided by the Congress, and even when we were able to pay for what we needed, it was only in Continentals, which are hardly worth the paper on which they're printed.
Well, I know, boy. Well, if you should like to take a turn about the town later, I am certain that Anna would like to get out of the house as well. I've kept her out of sight, as even the most well supervised troops may forget their manners in the presence of an unaccompanied young woman.
In my experience, these troops are anything but well-mannered when it comes to colonial women. They regard them as just another commodity to be seized as desired and cast aside when they finish with them. While I am glad for Anna's company and her assistance in my healing, I would have been less anxious were she out of their reach.
Well, what can't be helped can be endured. Now, let me take a look at those scrapes. How does this feel, boy?
Tolerable. Anna's plaster seemed to have done some good.
Binding you to the bed most of the time did you more good, I'll wager, as it prevented you from doing yourself greater harm. In any event, you are probably healed up enough now to stir about out of doors, although there is little worth seeing except red coats and works they are throwing up all about town. I don't expect that they would appreciate you poking about those either.
Oh, as much as I might like to bring some intelligence to our forces should the opportunity present itself, I rather doubt that the British will make it all that easy.
Too right, I am certain. Let's get you out of the bed.
Hardly hurts at all to breathe now.
To have the healing powers of youth again. I need to go and check on supper.
I took the liberty, with Mrs. James' permission, naturally, of altering this one to fit you. Help you.
Help me, please.
Come here. Oh, there we go. One arm. Yep. Almost. Careful. Oh, I wish you were less stubborn about getting help with the things that are difficult for you.
I asked for help, didn't I? I'm sorry. I dislike running into my limitations, particularly where others can see it happening.
I know, Nathaniel. I didn't mean to laugh at you, but if you had seen yourself, I doubt that you could have stopped a chuckle or two.
I suppose I did look aside at that.
You looked as though you were engaged in a mortal struggle with the shirt, and the shirt was getting better of you. If you can't laugh at yourself when you're doing something like that, you'll never be able to cope with the day when you need to untie a knot in order to free yourself.
Ooh, I fear that learning to do that may be a longer task than was healing from my injuries.
It will go faster if you can listen to your Anna's laughter and join in, rather than getting your back up. Supper's ready.
Thank you for the shirt, Mrs. James, and for the advice. I shall endeavor to make good use of them both.
Huh. You'll try, I'm certain, but without someone reminding you, I have a feeling that you would come to disregard both the service and the quality of the shirt. You are fortunate indeed that I will be happy to provide those reminders.
Oh, I am grateful for that, my dear friend. Perhaps you can also remind me from time to time that I was no paragon of grace even with 2 usable arms. And so I should not attempt activities that would have been demanding for me even before this one was ruined.
I will remind you of how very capable you are, and that the evidence of your capacity for great things stands before you. Now, let us go and enjoy a supper at a proper table.
See, with love, you can do anything, including putting on a shirt. Find yourself someone you can laugh with, and no task or hardship will be too great.
But I mean, now what? How are a one-armed man, a widow, and a girl going to take on what had to seem like the whole British army?
Oh, you were not there yet. They still need to eat supper, which I assume would be difficult as the aforementioned army is there looting and ransacking the town. Wait a minute. Pretty ableist and sexist of you to assume that a one-armed man, a widow, and a girl wouldn't be able to do anything.
Now, that's not.
Oh, Nate. Actually, as funny as it probably was at the moment, Anna was right. She shouldn't have laughed at him. I'm sure it was embarrassing and frustrating enough not to be able to put on a shirt when you're used to doing so much more. And then to be told to just suck it up and deal with being laughed at. No wonder he got kind of a defensive and upset. I know Mrs. James obviously meant well, but it's not really cool to tell someone who's just still recovering from a life-changing injury that they're going to have to just be laughed at, and that's how they have to deal with it.
That's an excellent point. Yes, Mrs. James meant well, and while I think Nathaniel did take the advice in the spirit it was intended, it's not our place to tell someone how they should cope with a major traumatic event like losing the use of an arm, as everyone does so in their own way at their own pace. All we can do is to be there and be supportive of them in any way they may require.
I mean, yeah, but sometimes when life is just giving you one bad turn after another, the only thing you can do is laugh through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to laugh through the pain of some of the traumatic things I've experienced has really been a vital tool for me to move through and and pass them. Obviously, everyone is different, and both of your points still stand. That isn't up to anyone else to tell you how you should cope. But, I feel like laughing through the pain shouldn't be discarded out of hand.
Well, the point would be, as they told us in kindergarten, if you remember, is you need to make sure you're laughing with someone, not at them.
Yes, join in. Don't poke fun. It isn't funny unless everyone is laughing along. But we digress. After getting Nathaniel's shirt on him, they moved into the kitchen. Typically simple for the time: stone hearth, cooking crane, cast iron kettles and tools, with a small window looking outside toward the neighbor's house on the other side of a tidy picket fence.
Thank you kindly, Mrs. James, for the supper.
Glad you enjoyed it. Wish I knew where our next meal was coming from.
Well, I can go down to the mercantile and... Never mind. I don't suppose that the British have left anything there, even if Mr. Jackson were still about.
Nay, nor have they even left as such as a stray goat unclaimed. The chickens have gone missing, no doubt into the pot of one company's mess or another.
I know that Mr. Richard had instructed everyone to load up and carry away whatever they could so as to deny our British guests an easy supply for their forces. I was to have supervised the children catching what chickens we could on the way out of town. If only I hadn't fallen.
Don't, Nathaniel! You did all that you could and more. So, we've no meat and little prospect of getting any. What do we have?
Well, I have a little bit of salt beef in the cask in the basement, if it comes to that, and some potatoes that are more eyes than food. I thought we could plant those in the yard and see if they will produce for us before the season gets too advanced. Might have some onions down there too. That ought to be planted as well.
I cannot be of much help in the digging and planting, but I can pull weeds and pick off pests with one hand easily enough.
Aye, that you can. When Mr. Richards was making his plans to evacuate the people of the town, did he give you any basis on which you might guess how long our guests will bedevil us?
Oh, nay, though I shouldn't doubt that they will want to quit this place soon enough, if only to take up the pursuit of General Greene's army again. Of course, if that Frenchman who visited before the British arrived, General Lafayette it was, when he learns that Cornwallis is here, he might persuade General Washington to force the British out sooner. That is, if Washington can bring enough able men to muster. I have no real sense of the disposition of our forces, though, beyond the rumors we have all heard, for our neighbors had to fly from here.
Should our forces come here to challenge the British, it won't be safe to venture out and fetch water. In addition to helping with the planting, you can pump water and carry it. I have a quantity of empty, clean casks in the cellar, which will do nicely to store water against the possibility that it might become unsafe to pass through the streets.
That seems but prudent.
Anna, have you any experience as a gardener?
No, I've been learning to mend and sew, that I may pursue a trade.
Well, it's high time you learn. We had best be early to bed that we may, in the words of poor Richard, be also early to rise. Healthy, wealthy, and wise may be more elusive, but I'll settle for being fed.
Oh, did Nathaniel get to meet General Lafayette? He was so dreamy in Hamilton.
Let me see. Oh, yes, he actually did. When Lafayette was touring Yorktown before the battle and trying to gather intel from the local militia, Nathaniel mentioned in one of his letters that He didn't immediately recognize the exact rank, as he had never met anyone higher than a colonel before. Also, the white sash Lafayette wore was completely unfamiliar to him. The man's accent was unfamiliar to Nathan as well, though it was not difficult to understand him. He appeared to be only a few years older than Nathaniel himself, despite his displayed rank. His eyes held a lively intelligence, and his bearing exhibited humility despite his high rank.
I am the Marquis de Lafayette, at your service, monsieur. I am sent by His Excellency, General Washington, to assess the defenses of this town. I am also to learn anything I can from you of the British movements in the surrounding area.
Honestly, I was hoping that you could tell us what you know of the activities of the enemy forces in the area. We've heard all manner of wild tales, and we don't know whether to run outright or prepare to fight.
I will tell you what I can, monsieur, but they are everywhere on the move. We have so far contained them only by the most difficult of efforts. Most recently, I joined with General von Steuben and the militia commanders in the defense of what remains of Richmond. As you have likely heard, there is not much there, but what they could find, the British meant to take. The regulars have marched out into the countryside to conduct raids, but our men have been able to constrain their movements.
Do you believe that the British will come here?
Ah, it seems inevitable, monsieur, that they must at least pass through, given their movements to date. Else, I would not spend my time taking the measure of this place.
Well, are there any measures that we ought to be taking to prepare for the possibility of their arrival?
Ah, you appear to have already given your full measure of service to the cause, monsieur. What is your part in this?
I am responsible for organizing and leading the evacuation of those who cannot fight, should the need arise. I may no longer be able to bear a musket, but I can readily enough discharge these duties with but one working arm.
Ah, I meant no offense by my words, monsieur. And I am glad to see that this important task is laid upon a man as competent as you.
Are we in immediate peril? Should I begin putting into action the plans I've laid with the evacuees?
There is no safe place where you could go. If the British arrive, try to hie off in the opposite direction, whatever that may be. But until then, there is little you might do.
Yeah, that was my thought as well, but 'tis good to hear it confirmed by someone more experienced than I.
Well, here come my aides, so we will now be off. Best of good fortune to you in your duties, mon ami. Au revoir.
And to you too, sir.
As he watched the men ride off, Nathaniel couldn't help but think that Yorktown had not seen the last of them. And he was right.
Oh, that is so cool. Don't you think so, Nate? Nate?
Yeah, kinda, I guess.
It is kind of cool. You know, one of the most amazing and fascinating things about history is that no matter what or when it is, you have an ancestor who lived in that time. And it's even cooler when you have an ancestor who actually lived through a major historical event and met a major historical figure. It does make me wonder what your however many great grandchildren Well, think about knowing they had direct ancestors that lived through all of this.
Oh, have we enough water in the house? It sounds as though there's the possibility of action soon.
What is this now? What makes you think that?
I heard what I took to be cannon fire, and then I saw a messenger arriving at the headquarters building down the way with the greatest of dispatch. The only conclusion I can reasonably draw is that he was there to deliver word of some hostile force arriving. If that is the case, then we need to be certain that the preparations we've discussed are in readiness. I should very much like to avoid being hurt by our friends, or used by the enemy to keep our friends at bay.
We are short on foodstuffs, but that's nothing new. Pity they couldn't wait until we had more time to harvest everything from the garden, but we have some put by.
I'll pile some old clothes atop the barrels, so what little we have should be secure, should the British come around looking to forage again. I doubt that they would think to look under cast-off shirts for their suppers.
The sense I've gotten from the British soldiers who've been incautious enough to comment near me on the matter is that they have foraged pretty widely around the area and are starting to run out of plantations and farms to raid. I'll have to start bringing in supplies from elsewhere. Although, if the American forces are close enough for cannon to be audible, they may have missed their opportunity to do so.
Well, if you happen to see a chicken about, this would be a capital time if they're to bring it in. If it's a hen, we can keep it quiet in the cellar and use its eggs. Otherwise,
soup would be a nice addition to our diet. Oh. The meal and wheat I was able to bring back from where my ma had hidden it in our house is nearly spent. High summer is too early to bring in the potatoes.
oh, they're probably worth bringing in if we're to be confined in the house.
Until we know there will be action, should we not let them grow as large as they can?
You're right, of course, lad. I just remember being trapped inside a blockhouse at the frontier one summer when we lost an entire crop of to various raiders. There was good food ready for harvest in the fields, but we listened to the counsel of someone who said that they were just passing through. Got very hungry indeed that year.
I'm sensible of your concerns, but I think that we'll have a little more notice of the immediacy of our need. What do you see?
I can just barely see a great column of soldiers coming up from the bluff. It looks as though there are some cannon being drawn up the hill as well.
Come back down here, then. That sounds as though they are concerned about a threat from above town rather than from the river. I should like to peer out from upstairs and see whether there is anything visible that might explain their hurry.
Is that wise with so many of our guests stirring about out there?
Oh, I can move about the house without being seen, as you've already closed the shutters everywhere except the kitchen. They have never shown any interest in our housekeeping, apart from what they could steal from your larder.
Scoundrels, a lot of them. Mind that you do not appear to be acting the spy.
Oh, I've no doubt that the Continentals have plenty of spies abroad in these parts already. I can add nothing to their knowledge, only to our own.
I do wish that he wouldn't take such chances.
You must let him do what he can, child. Mr. James never liked me trying to tell him what he should not do, or Nathaniel has his reasons to be even touchier than someone clucking over him like a mother hen.
I know, but I fear that he hasn't learned his lesson from falling and nearly killing himself when his ma's kettle fell onto him.
If he didn't learn from that, then he's not as half as smart as I've seen him be. You've got a good man there, Anna, and you'll do well to respect his considerable abilities.
Oh, I do, but I just want to make sure that he's fine.
No, but Oh, but Anna, if he's as smart as I think he is, then he won't learn any better from your worrying than from experience. But you can give him cause to wonder whether you truly think he's a whole man.
I take your meaning, Mrs. James, and you are right. I'll be more mindful of what worries I express, lest I undo what I've been trying to assure him of.
Oh, you will hardly believe what I saw. It's well that we have made the preparations that we have. I think it is too late now to try to make further safeguards against the coming storm.
How so, boy?
The soldiers who passed by here at such a clip are busying themselves up above the town, throwing up earthworks and defensive positions. I saw no sign of our forces, but the British clearly have reason to take these measures.
But if you saw no Americans, then why are you so certain that it's too late to make further provisions?
Well, up toward the head of the river, I could just see two great ships, what our naval friends call ships of the line for their role in forming the primary line of battle in a naval engagement.
How is that any different from the ships that the British already have here?
Ah, but these are not British ships. Cannot make out any pennants on them, but our unwelcome guests certainly seem to be making ready to receive them, not as friends, but as a hostile force. I watched men rowing out to carry crews and supplies to the British ships with as much haste as any ship's launch I've ever seen.
Well, that certainly puts a different complexion on the preparation above town. If these ships of the line are the smaller of the threats they're facing, what approaches by land?
I'd say that we are sitting between two great rocks in a flood, and they are about to strike together right over our heads.
It was going to be a difficult evening for them. Sleeping with a major injury is difficult even today in a comfortable, expensive mattress and with modern medications. In a cellar with no painkillers and under constant threat of discovery by a hostile force, with a battle raging right outside, nigh on impossible.
Oh, plus, I'd assume Nathaniel would probably be suffering from some PTSD at this point after Waxhaws.
Well, that sounds about right. It also sounds like he knows what he's talking about with uh, great rocks in the flood. I, I know sometimes how I felt in Iraq during a major engagement. I mean, all this insanity and chaos completely rushing around you, I mean, pushing you down. Yet, try as you might, you feel powerless to stop it. And just all you can do is try to write it out and take care of your squad mates as best as you can.
Oh, I think that's the most I've heard you talk about your time in Iraq, Nate.
No, it's not something I like talking about. But I am talking with a therapist about it, and they are helping me process what I experienced. And I am grateful I have the resources and support structure around me to have access that I know too many guys didn't have that. And, well,
I'm glad you are processing that and doing so at your own speed. You know, there is no right way through grief or trauma. And everyone takes their own path down that road, including Nathaniel.
Nathaniel! Nathaniel! Nathaniel, my love, wake up!
Oh, yes, Anna, I'm sorry. The sound of the fighting stirred the memories of the battle I was in, and they overcame me for a moment.
You were screaming, Nathaniel, as though someone were ripping apart your very body.
Oh, it will be all right, Anna. My ghosts will haunt me, but they will not master me. You've already convinced me that I am a whole man, even if I no longer possess a whole body. This does not take away what is important to me.
I know that, Nathaniel. If anything, you seem to be more whole than someone like Michael Bell, who retains his limbs, but has lost his care for the friends he grew up with, and the country that made his station in life possible. The hardship you have survived has marked you, though, and I'm not speaking of your arm. Sometimes, when you think I do not notice, you look out onto the horizon, as though you were scanning for enemy troops there. And when you hear a noise in the dark, you jerk as though you're afraid you will be shot again. I know we are not safe in this town, with the British thick on the ground around us, and our allies gathering with the intent to crush them and drive them out. But even when no threat is nearby, you are alert for any possible danger. It frightens me, Nathaniel. The amount of pain and fear that is locked in your mind it's terrifying.
You have the right of it, Anna. I am always on the alert for dangers, even when none are present. I've told myself it is out of concern that you should never suffer the sort of loss that I have, but it is more than that. Until the day comes when I sleep beneath a stone, I will bear the marks of my experience, and not just here, but here. I cannot promise that you will never again see those ghosts torturing me, but I will give you my word that they will never bring you to grief.
I believe that you will never mean to harm me in any way. But I cannot help but worry that when you have lost the use of your faculties in some fit as seized you just now.
I will do whatever you need me to do in order to feel as though I'm no danger to you, Anna. I truly do not believe that there is any risk that I might harm anyone else, or even myself when I'm haunted, but if you are frightened of me, I will stay away from you.
No, never that. I am promised you by my own will, and my feelings for you have not changed one whit. If anything, I am more committed to our friendship and our partnership than ever. I may fear for you, and even for myself, but I will not let mere fright stand in the way of our joy together. Whatever your torments, Nathaniel, we will face them together.
Thank you, my dear friend.
If you two are finished, I should like to try to get back to sleep despite the din and wait for the morning to reveal whether our rescuers have prevailed or whether we will be obliged to break our fast on yet more potatoes.
From the sound of it, we'll be eating potatoes for breakfast, lunch, and supper too, but you're not wrong that sleep is the fastest way for you to find out. As for myself, I will try to keep quiet, which likely means that I should not try to sleep so long as the guns are playing out there. There is no sense in you losing more sleep, though, dearest friend. You go back to bed now, too.
As I said, sleep was fleeting, and breakfast, breakfast would be difficult. And now for the most difficult part, actually making it through the battle. As a very wise hobbit once said, I don't want to be in a battle, but waiting on the edge of one I can't escape is worse.
Did you really just make a Lord of the Rings reference to a Revolutionary War battle? We all know Lord of the Rings is a World War II allegory.
Nate, your mic's off.
Oh, brother. You're the best,
True,
Nate.
but
I'm so glad you're here.
yeah, it still applies. The Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Civil War, the War of the Roses between the Yorkists and the Lancastrians. I mean, any of the minor battles and skirmishes throughout all of human history. All you can think about is, will I make it? Will my friends be okay? What if they aren't? Who will take care of their family? What is even the point of this? Is the cause I am fighting for just? I mean, does the person on the other side think their cause is just? If so, I mean, who is right? Who is wrong? Your brain just goes around and around and around. I mean, that's what it was for me. Now, I can't speak for anyone else, and it doesn't seem like Nathaniel, Anna, or Mrs. James had any doubts on that score. But I would have to imagine I am not the only person to think about that.
No. The justness of a cause, it's usually determined by whether that side won or not. History is written by the victors after all. All throughout history, all sides of the conflicts always say, God is with us. History will be on our side. That obviously can't be true. And without getting into religious debate of it, the world, sadly, is not always that simple. To use one of your examples, Nate, just look at the Wars of the Roses. You can't really say anybody won, except maybe the Tudors, because both of the major houses were wiped out.
Indeed. Now is the winter of our discontent. And it must certainly have felt like it for Anna and Nathaniel and Mrs. James as they were trying to figure out breakfast with a cannon fire raining down all around them and without an adequate night's sleep.
Breakfast. Let me guess, potatoes.
I could have at least waited long enough for me to cook some potatoes before they started other entertainments again.
Perhaps we ought to take the British up on their offer to retreat to the lower town, out of reach of the guns from the siege. Now that the French fleet has moved out to simply prevent any enemy ships from coming to take these fellows away, there's little risk of action that will threaten the structures down there.
I did not permit the British to chase me out of my house when they arrived, and I cannot see how I should let our forces do what the enemy could not.
Oh, I do not fear that our armies would come to the door and threaten violence. But a cannonball or a musket shot need not to be aimed at us to strike the house. They would go through these walls as readily as they do flesh and bone. Nobody in this house needs to suffer what I have in the name of stubborn pride. If you will not leave this house, then perhaps we can make the cellar comfortable enough.
We can bring down some proper pallets to sleep on should the need arise again, and we've got water enough. And it was wise to hide the potatoes down here after the harvest too. If we had a hearth, we could stay down here almost without relief. I'm eager for something to eat though, so I believe I will venture above to cook.
We should wait until the firing stops.
The hearth will protect me anyway. We've got to have cooked food and hot water if we're to keep spirits and flesh together. You could go back to sleep if you can sleep through the din.
Oh, Nick, there's no chance I could sleep through that. And if I could, it would be an open invitation for the old specters to come and haunt me. No, I will stay awake and contemplate the errors of my ways.
Huh, that will not occupy you for long.
Huh.
And if you cannot remember enough errors to distract you until the guns are still, I will be glad to help.
Oh, what do you imagine is the cause for so much firing?
I do not think that it's our artillery firing on our guests, else we should have heard some balls striking nearby, as someone's shot went long or bounced off something at its target. Given that, it seems likely that the British are trying to dissuade our men as they approach the walls here, or otherwise endanger the fortifications.
I'm glad enough that we are not at risk, but I wish that our friends above the town were not the targets of the British guns either.
Had it only lasted for a short while, I might have thought that it was an attempt to break through the siege and find some relief in the countryside. Or that some unsuspected British force had come to the reinforcement of this place from behind the American lines and was trying to make its way into town. So that's good news, in its way.
Oh, won't they run out of power and shot eventually if they continue firing so much?
I would think so, particularly without any new supply possible by sea or land. It may be that they laid in a greater supply than they needed of those, while neglecting to provide for the men who would need to serve the guns.
Oh, and for the horses needed to move them.
Sure. I've seen similar messes during the course of my own service. As many shirts as would clothe the regiment, but no more shoes than would supply a small company. Or it may be that they have decided that the expenditure of powder and ball in the service of a worthy enough goal to impoverish themselves the same at a later point in the fight. Whatever they hope to accomplish with this, I would surely like to see them either meet or abandon their goal. This is no way to spend a day.
Well, you did say that the two forces would strike sparks where they met.
Oh, that I did. I only wish that they could be somewhat less noisy in doing so.
Boiled potatoes left enough to last us until tomorrow, if need be.
Oh, let me get that.
I'll go and fetch hot water.
Oh, I hadn't known how hungry I was until this very moment.
'Tis a wonder how the smell of something I've grown so tired of can still set my mouth to watering given the proper degree of hunger. Ooh.
Had to carry that carefully to avoid cracking the plates. Here, take these, and I'll go fetch our cups, as it seems that we're to be here a bit longer.
Hot, hot, hot.
Now we can properly break our fast. Those of us who haven't already, that is.
Are they really complaining about potatoes? In my opinion, the potato is the crown of the vegetable kingdom. Right? There's roast potatoes, jacket potatoes, fried potatoes, curry potatoes, and I can murder a curry.
Oh, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
Now who's making a Lord of the Rings reference? Easy there, Samwise and Rincewind. Yes, they had lots of potatoes. But let us not lose track. The shelling eventually stopped, and the landscape bore the scars of it, much to Anna's chagrin.
they have done to the fields above the town.
Even a short engagement rips up the earth something fierce, and these fellows have been blasting away at each other for a fortnight.
I should wonder whether those fields will ever bear crop again.
Well, that is the least of the worries of an army dug in for a fight. The men on both sides want only to avoid being planted themselves.
Oh, war is so much uglier than I could have ever anticipated. I'm filled with wonder that you can regard it with such calm.
There. You can see where the American cannonballs have struck with some effect. Their fortifications are smashed in places, and you can even see where a cannon has been overturned by one of our shots.
And yet our enemies cling to this place, as though their lives and fortunes depended upon it.
Isn't that the character of this entire contest? I never told you of the British regular who died before my eyes while the surgeons patched me up after the battle, did I?
No?
He'd been struck in the chest, but survived the initial gunshot wound. He was unlucky in the fever that followed, though. He spent his final hours raving and begging for his mother and his sweetheart and his little sisters and sobbing about never seeing the green, green grass of his home back in England.
How awful for him. And for you.
Just at the end, he seemed to recover himself. And I found that I was hoping he had turned the tide against the fever. I watched his chest rise and fall with his breath, thought about his ma back home and his sisters, and I even said a prayer for his deliverance from his illness. Then he opened his eyes wide and looked right at me.
You're the one that shot me, rebel. You're the one who killed me.
Oh.
Of course, that was his final breath. He saved it all up to pass the guilt of taking his life onto me.
Oh.
I don't know whether he was right, whether I'm the one who fired the shot that kept him from the green, green grass of England and left him instead under the blood-soaked red soil of South Carolina. But it may as well have been me, for all that it matters. Oh, would you look at that?
Oh, what are those in the water?
It's their horses. They've shot their horses and dumped them in the river, likely for lack of anything to feed them.
Oh, that is the most awful thing I have ever seen. How do they mean to retrieve their cannon whenever this is over?
If they prevail, they can get more horses, but if they don't, there is no sense in keeping them alive just to hand them over to our forces.
Oh, and to think that I said that what they've done to the fields was ugly.
Oh, those poor horses.
Well, such is the nature of war.
Poor Nathaniel? The nature of war is that the heat of battle, you may never know if you actually fired the shot. Yeah, that ended a specific life. But the odds are you extinguished at least one. That is something you have to find a way to live with. It is easier to do if you can tell yourself that you didn't fire that shot, that the person you killed was just a faceless enemy, not a living, breathing human being. To look that person dead in the eye, to pray for their recovery, but to hear them name you as their killer to your face with their dying breath. That is something that stays with you forever and just eats at your soul.
While I was tending the hearth to cook this morning, I saw a most curious and distressing sight.
Oh?
There was a detail of redcoats hauling a wagon piled with their dead. Thought that they were bringing them to some place below town to give their fellows a proper burial, but instead they stopped by Mr. Thurman's cellar entrance.
Oh no, please tell me they didn't act.
I did. I carried them down into a cellar and dumped them there.
Good heavens. That is almost enough to make me glad that they tore apart my ma's house for firewood. Now, a pulled-down house can be rebuilt at some expense and difficulty at the end of this affair. One that has been used as a grave for a dozen men or more, though, is there any way to recover such a property to a mundane use?
Is there any inch of this town that will not have received blood at the end of this contest? Whether it be British blood or our own? It hardly seems possible that anyone could live here again at all. After all that has happened.
I do not know, my dear friend. There has been so much destruction across the countryside that it is hard to see how life anywhere in this country could possibly return to normal if the war were to end this very day.
Normal? Oh, ha!
That seems like an impossible dream. There's too much animosity between our two nations at this point for either to give any ground. Either we win our total independence and have no more involvement again with kings and parliaments, or they crush our revolt utterly and erase the idea of men being ruled only by their own consent for all time. There does not seem to be any space between these two positions for a compromise anymore. There was a time when this affair started that I heard my pa say that the whole thing would be over in a day if Parliament would but grant us the representation we were due by our numbers. You like to say that there were as many subjects of the crown on this side of the ocean as on that, yet only those who resided over there had any representation at all. He said that had the Parliament but corrected that injustice, well, there would have been little will to press the cause of independence.
Do you really think so?
I don't know enough to have an opinion about the matter. I know only what my father's feelings were at that time. I misdoubt that he would take the same position today, with all that this war has cost us. Nor do I believe that the British government could convince their people to accept such a settlement, with all of the blood we've spilled, and the destruction of so much of value to them.
So, we fight.
We fight until one or the other of us is destroyed. Or both.
My money is still on our boys. These occupiers have expended hundreds of men, and God only knows how many barrels of powder and shot in this place alone, only to find themselves with no way to escape. By all that's holy, that sounded like it hit this house.
Wait! You'll not go up there and expose yourself to the hazard of being struck by a second shot aimed to follow the first.
You have the right of it, boy, but it rankles to hear the destruction of all that Mr. James put into this place with his own two hands. To sit here in the dark, powerless, to do aught about it.
I would guess that there are many on both sides of this fight who feel likewise. The project of building these colonies was the work of centuries. The short-sightedness of a few stubborn men now brings it all to ruin.
Isn't that what stubborn men always do?
Stubbornness isn't always a bad thing. After all, here we are, stubbornly refusing to die.
If I don't get something other than potatoes to eat soon, I may come to be a bit less stubborn even about that.
Let's even joke about that, my dear friend. A few more dull meals will be worth enduring in order to see us through to the end of this contest.
You are right, of course, my dear.
Whatever could that mean?
If it lasts, it may mean that one side or the other has called for parley. We might venture upstairs to see for ourselves.
And to see what they've done to my home.
Wow. Being stuck inside for a long period of time, despairing of any chance to return to normal, feeling like there's too much space between two sides to ever reconcile those differences. A tale as old as time, apparently.
Certainly seems that way, doesn't it? But history is full of times when that seemed the case, yet somehow eventually an accord is reached. There's always hope for the future.
Too often that somehow is bought with lives. Lives lost, lives destroyed, families torn apart. It's always the same, isn't it? When that first shot is literally or even metaphorically fired, no matter how right one side may feel, you have no idea who's going to die. You don't know how many children are going to scream and burn, how many hearts will be broken, lives shattered, how much blood will spill until everybody does what they were always going to have to do from the very beginning.
And what is that?
Sit down and talk.
Isn't that from Doctor Who?
Yes. Yes, it is. But sometimes we need stories and fiction to put things into perspective for us. That may be from a TV show, but it doesn't change the reality of the situation. It's so hard to feel any hope when both sides are so entrenched in their views, so convinced that they and they alone are right. I am a historian. I've seen this play out literally 1,000 times. We never learn, do we? I'm right, you're wrong. I'm big, you're small. Nothing you can say or do will convince me otherwise. Each side is so determined to own the other side that they refuse to accept they may actually have a point. Politics, religion, science, the battleground changes, but the fight itself never does. The price is always paid by innocent people. They're in the unfortunate. They're in the wrong place at the wrong time. 600,000 people are dead in this country alone over the last year. And why? Because one stubborn man couldn't admit that he might be wrong, and millions more couldn't bring themselves to admit they may have been duped. Millions more have had their livelihoods destroyed, their dreams that they worked toward for years shattered because one side was so convinced they were right that they refused to even have a conversation about what the negative impacts of their policies might be. You're wrong. I'm big, you're small. We'll always get people killed.
As badly as the houses around us have been mauled, I suppose I should count myself lucky. As long as the house isn't struck again, this can be repaired when this is over.
If this is a call for parley, then that might not be long now.
I will dare to hope. Yesterday, as I was preparing water, I heard two soldiers speaking outside the shutters to the kitchen as they hid from their duty for a moment's rest. They were greatly depressed at the state of affairs at their camp, and they were both remarking on how little hope there is of any relief, and how close they are to defeat if there can be none. They complained that their rations were reduced to the point of slow starvation, and they had been forced to slaughter their horses some weeks ago, as those unfortunate beasts had nothing left to eat either.
Oh, we saw them some days ago. They pushed the unfortunate beast into the river.
And the men, I hear, were full of regret at the loss of the meat now.
What a horrible, wicked thing for them to say!
Wicked or not, an army depends upon having full stomachs to maintain its strength, whether for fighting or for fleeing. With their rations so desperately depleted, I should be more surprised if they have not yet called for terms. Aye, there's the white flag above the British fortifications. Shouldn't be surprised either, as terrible as their condition is. I cannot see a single British cannon that hasn't been overturned or smashed. See where the breastworks have been torn apart there, and there.
I can see the destruction you're talking about, but it is passing strange that I see no soldiers at all.
I've only on rare occasions seen many men out and about. They're mostly at the earthworks or in their encampments out that way. Look, there's someone now.
Well, that appears to be a British officer coming back from the American line. He must be bringing back word of the results of their discussion.
He seems to be in quite a hurry.
We ought to be as well then, for I've no doubt that the shooting will resume shortly.
Oh, I had such high hopes that it would be over, too.
Lord Cornwallis likely failed again to accord proper respect to the armies of General Washington.
Or perhaps His Excellency the General has concluded that it is advantageous to further persuade Lord Cornwallis that he is well and truly defeated. In any event, I am convinced on the basis of what we could see that the end of this affair is quite near indeed. There's little remaining of the British defences of their stronghold here. The act of sending an envoy under a flag over to parley is a plain acknowledgement of their state.
I fervently hope that you were right in this, Nathaniel. This ordeal has been terrible, and its termination is much to be anticipated. Of course, not all of our time here has been terrible. I am ready to walk in the sunlight with you again, rather than huddle in darkness.
I should like that myself, of all things.
I should be down. I'll be down in the cellar trying to sleep while you two lovebirds go on sighing and gawping at each other. It's tiresome for an old woman to hear day in and day out for so long, don't you know?
Is it over?
Literally all over except for the shouting. The redcoats are beaten and they know it. All that remains is the official surrender. The Continentals have carried the day, and despite a few tense moments, Nathaniel, Mrs. James, and Anna have all escaped relatively none the worse for wear.
Oh, now what?
Cornwallis meets with Washington. The surrender is signed, and a new nation is born. A nation founded on the ideas that all are created equal, well, all are treated with decency and respect, where everyone is free to live their lives as they see fit.
And a nation that has continuously fallen short of those ideals.
Yes, we have. There's much to be proud of in our history. And there is much to be ashamed of, too. That's why it's so important to learn all of it, not just the good, but the shameful, too. The only way we can avoid making mistakes of the past is to know them, to understand them, understand how we made them, why we made them. To say that America is perfect and beyond reproach is an insult to the memories of all those who have and who continue to work tirelessly to hold us to the standards that we have set ourselves.
If you can get your end of the hole in the wall, I can push it up the rest of the way.
They still haven't moved.
They're just waiting.
The British soldiers look so very weary, don't they?
Well, that's because they know that they're beaten. Oh, I truly am daring to hope that this is all over. Oh, do you see what's become of the British fleet?
My God.
They're all sunk.
Aye, what's not sunk is burnt. It appears that they destroyed their own ships to deny our forces the use of them. There will be no retreat, no escape for Lord Cornwallis and his great army. There can only be surrender under terms that must even now be under negotiation.
The British have lost the siege.
It's finally
Oh, we owe you our lives. When I was hurt, you could have refused us a safe haven and left us to the unlikely mercy of the British Army's doctors. When the battle began in earnest, you could have turned us out to seek shelter with the rest of the townsfolk below the bluff. Instead, you welcomed us into your cellar with you.
Oh, stop you. Without you having stumbled into my house, I would have had no food grown to sustain myself and would have had to throw myself at the mercies of our occupiers. I needed you as much as you needed me, and I'll hear no more about it. I'm going to go down and fetch up the kettles and dishes and bring our bedding back up. I'll sleep in the kitchen. Nathaniel can take my room, and this one won't be usable for some time yet.
Oh, what stuff! You'll sleep in your own bed, and I'll put my pallet beside the bed in the room where you so were kind to provide to me. I can sleep on the floor beside Nathaniel, as I doubt that I could get any decent rest without the sound of his snoring.
Ah!
As you like it, then. I'll be happy enough, though, to never see the cellar used for anything but a storeroom for supplies and root crops.
Oof. Oh, hi. Better to hide potatoes in the dark than ourselves.
Never will I eat another potato again when this is over. Carrots, onions, squash, you can even feed me beans and corn. But don't you ever think to bring home potatoes.
It's happening. They're stacking their arms and surrendering themselves into the custody of our men. It's over.
Oh, what's the matter, Nathaniel?
It's nothing that I can easily explain, but I find myself wondering what we have accomplished. What good have we done when I see how much devastation has been wrought in both property and men?
We've won our independence from the king. That's what. Unless he should like to send another army the size of Cornwallis to us to reduce in like manner, it will be difficult for his majesty to prevail anywhere in this country. We have a lot of cleaning to do in here to prepare for whatever workmen I can find so that they can repair the wall and stop the weather from finishing what our friends on the American line have started. Help her get out of the way, but stop brooding at the window.
Damn. I had no idea about almost all of that.
Oh, I knew some of it, and I am really looking forward to telling my professor tomorrow. Having a personal connection to history makes it all the more fascinating. Wait. Nathaniel, Nate, Anna, and Dad, did you really name us after Nathaniel and Anna?
Maybe. Fortunately, your mother was on board. First boy would be Nate, first girl would be Anne. But you aren't the first ones named after them either. Your great uncle was also named after Nathaniel, and your great great aunt was named after Anna.
But, it's, I mean, it's been really helpful for me to see that I am not the only one who is had to deal with the lingering trauma following military service, or question if my sacrifices and the sacrifices of my friends and our family was worth it.
You're never alone, Nate.
No.
But I get your meaning. We can feel completely and totally alone during our darkest moments. Knowing that someone has successfully walked the path before you, it can serve as inspiration to keep going.
Yeah. Um, are you doing in-person classes yet, Anne, or online?
The school is requiring vaccinations for students to attend in person. I haven't been able to get mine yet since I'm not high risk. I wanted to wait and allow others who needed it more to get theirs. But I'm staying online through the rest of the term, and I have an appointment scheduled for my first appointment, Pfizer, next week.
Well, I received mine already, Moderna, but I am volunteering at my local clinic to help others get theirs.
Yeah, help or get out of the way. You both do your namesakes and me proud.
Oh.
And I can't wait to see you both in person again. Ah.
Hi, I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this performance of The Siege as a virtual play. I'd like to invite you to experience all the parts of the story that Andrew and I had to leave out. The novel that we base this play upon is available at your favorite online retailer or directly from my website in ebook, audiobook, paperback, or hardcover at tfar.us/shop. Buy directly from me, you can use the coupon code MAJESTIC to get 25% off the retail price of The Siege in any format through the end of August 2022. If this performance has left you hungry for more, I have plenty to offer you. In addition to The Siege, I've written over a dozen other novels of the American Revolution, each set in a different colony or future state, and all focused on the experiences of ordinary people as they navigated that extraordinary era. I try to find stories of little-known events to share with my readers and to explore viewpoints that are often overlooked. Thank you very much for joining us in this performance, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you all so very much for coming to see our show. I hope you really enjoyed it. I could not be more excited to have presented this to you, and I could not have asked for a better cast. So without further ado, let me introduce first as our backup actor and the wonderful General Lafayette, Reed Sanders. As the widow Mrs. James, Rose Taylor. As Nate, Alex Asher. As Anne, Lisa Sanders. Or whatever your last name is, I already forgot. Sorry. Lisa Smith. There we go. Lisa Smith. As Thomas, our almost narrator, Michael Wren. Who else could you have do that role? And for our leads, as Anna Ware, the incomparable Ariel Hicks. And Nathaniel Wooster, the amazing Brandon Urie. Thank you all for coming to our show. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you will catch future Majestic Piece shows whenever they happen. Thank you, and good night.